Hello. This is a new original story from my channel. What a mess. Zania couldn't hold back, exclaiming as she slammed her small palm against the metal door of her locker, where she kept her things during shifts. The key had jammed in the old lock again, and she'd been struggling with the stubborn door for no need to torture yourself like that. Oh, no thanks. Zania gave a faint smile. Anything but dealing directly with Valentine Victor. I'd rather live with this door for another 100 years. Saying the last bit, she shyly lowered her head, avoiding looking at the janitor changing nearby. Suit yourself, Gina shrugged, and as if farewell, quickly slinging her old sports backpack over her shoulder and leaving the changing room. Till tomorrow. Zania let out a deep sigh, then slowly began gathering her things. Heading home, she got caught in a heavy downpour. She hadn't brought an umbrella that day, so she had to wait out the rain under the plastic awning of a nearby bus stop in Seattle. Staring at the streams of water pouring from the sky, Zania couldn't help thinking about what the person who'd caused her such deep emotional pain yesterday was doing now, and more importantly, what he was feeling. Zania pulled her phone from her bag to check messages. The last time Paul, her fiance, wrote to her was 3 years ago, right before they went together to a formal dinner at his parents' house. Marina and Victor were eager to meet their son's fiance, even hosting a small family banquet for four at their home in a wealthy Seattle suburb. Zania wore her best dress modest, but, in her view, elegant enough to present herself to her future in-laws. Oh, if only she could wipe that evening from her memory. So, this is your heart's choice, Paul's mother asked him at the doorstep, then turned a cold, sharp gaze on Zania. Marina scanned the girl critically from head to toe. When Zania opened her mouth to introduce herself, Paul's mother cut her off instantly. Well, since we've got no other option, come in. Zania, don't be shy, make yourself at home. It didn't take a genius to sense the barely veiled irritation and disdain in the woman's patronizing tone. Zania realized she hadn't won over her fiance's mother, but chose to pretend all was well to keep from upsetting Paul. Please, Zania, may I call you that? Tell us a little about yourself. Victor requested later, once they were all seated at the dining table. Yes, Zania, his wife, added with pointed courtesy. Do enlighten us. What's your job, your education? At that moment, Zania felt a slight wave of nausea. She grew nervous, unsure how to best answer her future mother-in-law. Mom, Dad, why the interrogation? Paul said with slight indignation. Aren't there other things to talk about? Zania will share about her family when she's ready, right? He cast a questioning look at his fiancée, and she blushed involuntarily. What's so special about what we asked? Marina snapped. It seems to me the natural desire of any sensible parents to know who their child plans to tie their life to. The woman shot Zania a meaningful glance, her eyes clearly saying, You'll never get my son, don't even dream of it. Zania prudently looked away, gazing at the costly wooden furniture and tall marble fireplace, whose luxury and beauty couldn't help but draw attention. It's fine, Paul, your parents are right, Zania said calmly, then looked straight at her fiancé's family. There's no secret here anyway. Paul squirmed, shifting his questioning gaze between her and his parents. It was obvious he didn't want his fiancée to share such details about herself. Why, Zania wondered. He just stood up for me so well. With no time to dwell on her fiancé's behavior, she answered plainly. I finished nursing courses a couple of years ago, and now I work at a city hospital in Seattle, helping people recover after surgeries or serious medical treatments. Marina's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. My dear, You're already 26. Couldn't you have at least finished some university, become, say, a pediatrician or therapist? The woman's outrage seemed limitless. She sliced the steak on her plate with fury, its juices spreading across the white porcelain, stirring unsettling associations. You know the competition for state-funded spots, even at our institute, is fierce, Zinnia replied, and paying for tuition, sadly, was beyond my means. My mom got sick a few years ago, joint issues, so she needs care. It got hard for her to move around the apartment, so I had to pick the lesser evil. Zinnia felt stung that these people sitting in their vast, richly furnished living room clearly had no clue how ordinary people lived beyond their world. Zinnia grew up in a very poor family with only her mother, who spent most of her life working as a cleaner in public greenhouses. The grueling long hours eventually took their toll, and Vera had to retire early. Imagine she still lives with her mother, Paul's father muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disappointment. Completely hopeless. Zinnia gripped the tablecloth under the table to keep from crying. She hadn't expected such a hostile reaction. Looking to her fiancé for support, she met his gaze, but he quickly looked away and took a big gulp of wine, acting like he was hearing about his fiancé's family for the first time. Zinnia stared at him in confusion, but he pretended not to notice her pain. But you must realize your career's utterly ruined now, Marina said venomously, pointing a sharply honed knife at her guest. You'll spend your life emptying bedpans and hauling sacks of their dirty laundry. Is that the fate you wanted, as hard as it was? Zinnia met the woman's harsh gaze, and answered resolutely, firmly. My job isn't just that. Yes, if needed, I can change a bedpan or bring a food tray to a ward. The main thing is that patients feel better. And I've never doubted my profession for a second. A moment later, she added, then stood abruptly from the table, unable to bear such scornful treatment any longer. Paul stayed seated, red as a crab, silent. Catching his glance, Zinnia realized Victor had signaled him not to interfere. In that case, Zinnia, I'm afraid you're not fit to be our son's future wife, Marina said furiously, rising to face her. You and Paul have entirely opposite life paths. My boy needs a fiancée who shares his interests and won't ruin his career with her questionable reputation. And what's questionable about helping people? Zinnia burst out. Listen, no need to get so heated. Victor tried to smooth over the scandal. My wife only meant you and Paul have two different social statuses. There's nothing prejudiced about it, but try to understand us. We're very dependent on the opinions of far more influential people. They just wouldn't get it if they learned what our future daughter-in-law does. Zinnia couldn't believe her ears. Lowering her eyes, she looked silently at her fiancé, who seemed frozen under his family's gaze, refusing to accept Zinnia as his fiancé. Paul, are you just going to keep quiet? She finally asked. Won't you do anything? Just let your parents keep humiliating me. When Paul looked up at her, Zinnia saw defeat in his eyes and only then realized he'd never defy his family's opinion, no matter how shallow or absurd. Sorry, he said softly. When we started dating, I thought something good could come of it. But now with Mom and Dad reasoning so sensibly about it all, I'm afraid they're right. We shouldn't see each other anymore. What was all Zinnia could say? We were planning a wedding. Don't you remember the words you said, how you confessed your love when we soared over the city in a hot air balloon? Are you just going to destroy our feelings? Don't you dare manipulate my boy, Marina shrieked, scorching Zinnia with her glare. What's scared you'll lose him? Of course you are. Paul's a catch. A promising businessman, by the way. Not for a beggar like you. Unable to hold back tears, Zania turned to leave silently when Paul's father stopped her. Wait, Zania, please, he said, gently touching her elbow. You see, we must have caused you some discomfort, maybe even spoiled your mood, but I'd like to ask you for something one last time, so to speak. What more do you want from me? Zania asked, wiping tears. Victor pulled a stack of cash from his pocket with a guilty smile, glancing around before swiftly pressing it into her hands. What are you doing? Zania gasped. What's this for? Don't say a word, he shook his head. Just take this money from me. Help your mother. Buy her good medicine for God's sake. But I beg you delete my son's number from your contacts and don't show up in his life again. Don't ruin the boy's future. He's really torn up over this. Zania listened to the older businessman, her eyes widening with each word. So Paul was the victim in this disgusting story. Thanks, but keep it, she said firmly, tossing the bills at Victor's feet. A beggar like me doesn't deserve such generosity. I'm a predator, right, here to steal your precious boy. Well, I can take care of myself and my mother. With that, Zania turned 180 degrees and left the mansion with her head held high. In the taxi, she couldn't stop crying. She'd never felt such humiliation and shame in her life. Deciding not to tell her mother to avoid upsetting her, Zania went straight to her room and locked herself in upon arriving home in their modest Seattle apartment. She needed to process this breakup alone to accept she'd never rise above a certain level in relationships. But if all rich people were such hypocrites and cynics, then it wasn't worth it anyway. Zania knew that at her age, being a nurse might look low status, but it was useful, noble, and honest work. No one could accuse her of neglecting her patients. They were always glad when the girl stopped by their wards. Zania, sweetie. You, okay. Vera's voice came from the hallway. Her mother worried when Zania returned from the visit so early and didn't come talk about the evening with her fiancé's parents. I'm fine. Mom just tired. Zania replied, reluctant to open the door. She didn't want her mother to see her so down. I saw from the window you took a taxi. Vera pressed. Did Paul not drive you this time? Zania paused for a moment, then decided to tell the truth. We're not together anymore. It's over. As soon as she said it aloud, oddly enough, a weight lifted from her soul like a stone falling away. Zania realized she was free from lies and the miseries that would have awaited her. In a marriage to such a spineless, sneaky man as her former fiancé turned out to be. Now, weeks after the breakup, Zania felt noticeably better. The pain had dulled, and she returned to her usual life of work, her mother, and complete freedom over her time and space. This quarter, she was moved to the ward for critically ill patients, so she was swamped with tasks. Patients and staff seemed satisfied with the young nurse, but one person constantly berated her and set up petty traps. That was none other than the department head. Tall, thin, about 50 years old, Valentine Victor Crane made a deeply unpleasant impression, largely due to his behavior and how arrogantly he treated patients. Zania was often stunned that for the department head, regular patients seemed non-existent. He preferred to focus solely on paying clients, trying to upsell them on costly tests and procedures. Much of what Crane pitched to these patients turned out to be unnecessary. But Zania couldn't contradict her boss. Lately, she tried to avoid Valentine Victor as much as possible, all because of an unpleasant incident some time back. Crane had hinted clearly that he'd like to connect not just at work, but outside it too. It'd help you move up the career ladder and gain a powerful patron in me, he said. Valentine Victor. Are you suggesting I become your mistress? Zinnia asked with genuine outrage. Her bluntness caught the man off guard, but he replied more confidently. I wouldn't use such a crude term, but essentially, yes. You got it. What's wrong with that? If you're worried about the age difference, don't be. I'm a man you could say in the prime of my years. Plenty of strength left. Zinnia thought she must have dozed off in the break room and was having a bad dream. But to her great dismay, the department head was completely serious. Please stop. I don't want to hear such filth, she said, eyes blazing. And going forward, Valentine Victor, please don't make such offers. I have a fiancé, for heaven's sake. What a shame. She bolted from the office he'd called her to hid in the bathroom, and quietly sobbed. No one had ever tried to buy her so openly, like she was some object a painting a clueless rich guy wanted to own without understanding art. Xenia wanted to finish her shift, go home, and scrub herself clean, hoping she'd made her position clear to the department head. But just days later, the advances resumed. Crane was relentless, utterly convinced she was just playing coy. He couldn't accept she had no intention of becoming his kept woman. Drop the act sentry. Why the fuss, he growled, when once again inviting her to his office. He locked the door and advanced menacingly. Valentine Victor opened the door. Zinnia said quietly but firmly, If you don't, I'll scream and the whole hospital will know what you're doing. Crane didn't even blink. You'll scream, security will come. And then you'll say I attacked you. He kept closing in, making Zinnia back up until she tripped over a table leg and fell onto a small couch in the office corner. And I'll tell them you threw yourself at me, couldn't control your passion because your fiancé's a weakling. Who'll they believe? Crane pounced on Zinnia, pinning her to the couch's fabric. Don't you dare, no, she yelled, writhing and kicking him hard in the stomach. The department head groaned, doubling over, and Zinnia now free-fled the office. Her first instinct was to go home and never cross the hospital's threshold again. She couldn't imagine working with someone like Crane facing danger, daily enduring harassment from such a vile man. Zinnia wasn't ready for that. She drafted a resignation letter thinking she could find a similar job elsewhere, but then rethought it. Cooling off and weighing the pros and cons, the young nurse decided that quitting now would mean Crane won, and his next victim would surely be someone else. By staying, Zinnia could quietly collect evidence of Crane's shady dealings and send it to the Washington State Department of Health, waiting for their response. From then on, Zinnia started watching her department head, gradually noting all instances of his petty juggling with paid tests and selling unverified supplements. Meanwhile, Valentine Victor, after that incident, suddenly left her alone, but that didn't mean he planned to forgive her for his humiliation. He nursed a hidden grudge and began setting up small troubles with eager help from the senior nurse. Hera Agnes had long been annoyed by Zinnia, her positivity, responsibility, and tailored approach to each patient. The girl outdid her, completing more tasks daily and ruining Hera's personal stats. This resentment united the pair, aiming to make every workday a small hell for Zinnia to drive the upstart out of the hospital. Spilled bedpans with contents splashed across wards, a broken changing room lock, jumbled reports, and heaps of other petty nuisances were meant to push Zinnia to her boiling point, making her want to resign. Zinnia suspected these troubles during her shifts weren't random, but didn't dare confront Hera, directly fearing she'd snitch to Crane, derailing her plan to expose him. Instead, the nurse patiently endured the bullying, hoping justice would one day catch up with the duo. That day, Zinnia felt completely drained. The night before, neighbors had thrown another drunken ruckus, keeping her up until nearly morning with slurred yells and deafening music. Naturally, she couldn't sleep. so she showed up to work, distracted, half asleep. Even 2 cups of coffee before her shift didn't help. Pushing open a ward door, Zinnia realized too late she'd entered the wrong room. The hospital had a strict divide between general and private paid wards. The latter were overseen by Hira Agnes, who strictly ensured only hand-picked staff served them. Zinnia, as expected, wasn't among the chosen, meaning she had no right to enter this ward. But seeing the man on the bed, his gaze brimming with undisguised longing and sadness, the young nurse's heart stirred. She couldn't muster the will to leave right away. She recognized him. It was Leonard Paul Marshall, a famous businessman in Seattle. Owner of a major construction conglomerate, he often aided the city building playgrounds and new schools for charity. He frequently popped up in the news with new projects, but had suddenly vanished from screens in recent months. Now, Zinnia knew why. If Marshall was here, his condition must be dire. This was the wing for hopeless cases. How could it be? Why, sorry, she said aloud. I must have mistaken the door. Catching herself, Zinnia moved to leave quickly to avoid the wrath of Hira, already always displeased. She grabbed the handle to return to the hall when a weak male voice stopped her from behind. Don't go, the businessman said quietly. Please stay. You know I'm so glad to see someone other than Hera Agnes. She's too harsh. Zinnia, shifting on the spot, debated what to do. She genuinely pitied Marshall, so she figured it wouldn't hurt to keep the fading businessman company briefly. Sitting by him on a chair, Zinnia took his medical chart from the bed's headboard. The terrifying diagnosis hit her eyes. Shaking her head sadly, the nurse tried to comfort the patient, though she knew it wouldn't matter much in his case. Well, now the man said with a gentle chuckle, you speak so sincerely with such sympathy. The last time I saw that was with my loyal notary. He dropped by a couple of hours ago. Needed to draft my will properly. Good lad. Xenia noticed tears glisten in the businessman's eyes as he mentioned his assistant. She gently touched his hand. Please don't get so worked up. It's very bad for you. Want me to pour you water? The man nodded faintly, swallowing hard, then quickly wiped away tears rolling down his face. I'd almost forgotten what it's like when someone treats you like a person, not a walking wallet. Marshall thought of his wife Nina, who'd visited yesterday to discuss inheritance details, seeming impatient for him to pass on. You know, I've always been a practical, down-to-earth man. Maybe even overdid it when it came to vague notions like paradise or the so-called afterlife. But now, as laughable as it sounds, I'm really scared to go. Scared that nothing will remain after me. Why call your thoughts laughable? Zinnia objected. On the contrary, those are perfectly natural feelings. Me or anyone else would likely say they're almost surely afraid of the unknown. The man looked at her, a faint spark lighting in his eyes. You reason so curiously. Tell me a bit about yourself. Been here long? I haven't seen you before. Zinnia smiled bashfully. That's because I'm rarely in this part of the building. I work in the general wards. She explained she wasn't supposed to be here, ending up by pure chance. As for my job, yeah, I once dreamed of going to medical school, but circumstances changed. My mom got seriously ill, so I had to drop that idea. Being a nurse doesn't shine with career prospects, but it still puts bread on our table. Listening, Marshall, to her surprise, smiled. His face glowed with kindness as he suddenly suggested, Zinnia, can I ask you to be my adopted daughter, just for a week, no more? A slight shadow crossed the businessman's face. That's what the doctors give me. I'd want you and no one else to care for me in my last days. Please. Zinnia blinked puzzled, staring at the patient. What about Hera Agnes? She asked warily. I see the senior nurse is personally assigned to you. I'm afraid they won't let me take her place. The businessman shook his head. That woman. Oh, I've never met such a cantankerous, perpetually unhappy person. Every day with her wrists becoming torture. He laughed faintly, then added more seriously. To be honest, Hera Agnes doesn't sit right with me. I think I deserve to spend my final days with someone more human. Xenia didn't know what to say. On one hand, she could understand the dying man's need for warmth and conversation in his last days. But on the other, what would management do if they found out Marshall preferred her over Hera Agnes Sentry? What are you doing here? A shout came from behind, and turning Xenia saw the senior nurse. No wonder many called her Hera the Horror behind her back. Tall and robust like a wrestler, she loomed over Xenia, hands on hips, glaring with a look that could petrify newer nurses. Who allowed you in here? No work to do, get back to your area now. The grannies in Ward 22 are waiting. Noticing Marshall closely watching their exchange, Hera faltered slightly. She hadn't expected the businessman with barely a week left to care about their work's details. Xenia tried to explain she was here by mistake, but Marshall cut off her excuses, firmly stepping in for her before the senior nurse. I asked Xenia to stay. Nobody was here, and I can't even pour myself a glass of water. He gave Hera a pointed look, hinting at her professional neglect. And I want Xenia to be my personal nurse from now on. Only she's allowed in my ward to help with everything. Marshall sighed heavily, catching his breath. Also, she'll bring my food and drinks. Make sure Xenia has 24-hour access to this floor. Marshall leaned back on his pillows wearily. Xenia instinctively fixed his slipped blanket. Fine as you wish, Hera Agnes said, throwing up her hands, then shot Xenia a venomous glance. Come, I'll issue you a special pass. Leaving the ward, Xenia felt her knees wobble with fear. Would they just fire her for this violation? But luckily, Hera Agnes, though livid, couldn't do anything. She had to obey the whims of a rich patient who paid well. Take it, she said roughly, handing over a small laminated card on a cord. You'll check on him 3 times a day, maybe more if needed. Thank God he won't last long. But listen, Sentry, one slip up and you're out, not just from my department, but the whole hospital like a cork. Got it. Xenia, staring wide-eyed at the senior nurse, nodded silently. From then on, her responsibility was one patient to whom she had to dedicate all her work time. She began caring for Leonard Paul, striving to help not just with daily tasks, but also to lift his spirits, secretly hoping it would ease his grave condition. They talked a lot, joked. Leonard Paul shared several funny stories from his life. Her pay doubled as nurses in private wards got a special rate for extra patient attention. On top of that, the businessman wanted to thank her personally, sending Xenia several pricey certificates for beauty salons and trendy boutiques via his manager. Please take them as my thanks, Marshall urged when Xenia brought the certificates back, saying she couldn't accept such expensive gifts. I just want a kind girl like you to overhaul her wardrobe so you're not embarrassed to go out, Leonard Paul explained. Think I don't know what nurses make at a state hospital in Seattle. So let me make your life a bit brighter like you've done for mine. Xenia blushed, but finally agreed. When she went to a Seattle mall the next weekend to use the gifts, her amazement was boundless. The certificates didn't just cover top-notch clothes and cutting-edge beauty treatments, they included VIP service. In other words, Xenia felt like a true princess, like the daughter of an Arab sheikh, with all the world's riches at her feet. Her delight was only tempered by the realization she shouldn't get too immersed in luxury. After all, the fairy tale was set to end in days. Though Zinnia wished with all her heart for a miracle to heal the elderly millionaire, Vera, seeing her daughter's clear transformation, couldn't stay quiet. She disapproved, thinking Zinnia had willingly sold herself to some rich old man. "Why is he suddenly giving you all this?" she asked, while Zinnia cared for her with no less zeal than at work. "Sweetie, tell me the truth," Vera said, looking at Zinnia with worry. "Is he doing something disgraceful, Mom? What nonsense you're talking." Zinnia smiled back. "I bought all this stuff myself, and the patient just wanted to thank me, so he gave me certificates." After a thought, she added, "And he's not some old guy. He's quite a charming man, even if older. Of course, there's no talk of slavery. I'm just caring for him in a private ward, so they're paying me more." Somewhat reassuring, her mother Zinnia went to her room. She wanted a quiet evening, looking through old family photos. She'd found the album in the attic recently. Apparently, Vera had tucked it into a box of old stuff years ago when her health let her climb stairs, then forgot it. Leafing through yellowed pages with half-faded photos, Zinnia, to her surprise, suddenly spotted a picture of her patient. Leonard Paul was captured against a mountain river. Naturally, he looked younger, but his appearance was unmistakable. "Mom, who's this?" she asked later, unable to curb her curiosity. "Oh," that Vera said dreamily, "that's Lenny Marshall, my first love. We broke up the year we finished technical school, right at graduation." "Really? Why, oh, I caught him with another girl at a cafe." Vera waved off. "He swore there was nothing between them, but I saw how they looked at each other." For a moment, Vera's face turned thoughtful and sad. Then she snapped out of it. "Why are you asking?" she asked, alarmed. Now Zinnia's turn to blush. Clutching the album to her chest, she reddened to her roots and said slowly, "You see, Leonard Paul. He's the one I'm caring for now. He's in really bad shape, only has a few days left." Vera paled like chalk, pressing her hands to her face. "So he's the one giving you all these gifts," she whispered, her face blotching as if ready to cry. "Yeah," Zinnia answered softly, setting the album aside. "Sorry if I made you recall something painful." Vera shook her head, tears bursting out. "What's wrong?" Zinnia looked at her, puzzled, touching her forehead. "Are you feeling bad?" "No," dear Vera replied, grabbing her daughter's hand. "It's something else." She gazed at Zinnia for a few moments, then said, "I never told you, but the day I left Lenny, I found out I was pregnant." Vera, ashamed, covered her face with her hands. "Of course I didn't tell him. He betrayed me and definitely didn't deserve to raise his child. Miserable liar." Zinnia, stunned, sat opposite her mother, trying to take it in. "Mom, are you saying Leonard Paul is my father?" Sobbing, Vera nodded. "Forgive me, sweetie." She gripped Zinnia's hands. "I know I should have told you much sooner, but I was so angry at his status, his possibilities. He lived happily basking in money, playing the great philanthropist while we counted pennies." Vera bowed her head, saying in a tragic tone, "I was so hurt by him, hated him for all we went through because of him, and now he's on the edge of life and death, and it hurts so much. Understand, no matter how angry I was at him, he's still your father. I never wanted this outcome for him. I'm so ashamed. So ashamed." "Don't blame yourself," Zinnia said, stroking her mother's back to comfort her. "You didn't make him sick. It just happened. Fate decided." The rest of the evening, Zinnia couldn't shake the thought that she was caring for her own father. Her resolve to help him, to save him from certain death, grew stronger. But how? Xenia didn't know yet. Nor could she summon the courage to tell the businessman she was his daughter. Nina nervously shook cigarette ash, and taking another drag shot a venomous glance toward her husband's ward. You said he wouldn't last more than a week, she demanded of the attending doctor. It's been 2.5, and he's still kicking. The doctor, standing almost at attention, spread his hands. Predicting an exact death date with a disease like your husband's is very tricky. It could be days, could be months, depends on care, but mainly on the patient's inner spirit. Nina's eyes narrowed into two snake-like slits. And what's happened lately to make him suddenly change his mind about dying? Who knows? The doctor replied with a question. Just heard they assigned him a new nurse. Young brunette. Maybe she's inspired him somehow. Nina tossed her cigarette onto the hospital parking lot asphalt in Seattle and crushed it savagely with her high boot's heel. A nurse, huh? Tell me, can't we somehow speed up my husband's passage to the beyond? The doctor blanched, stepping back a couple paces. What do you mean? He stammered. Don't act like a fool, it doesn't suit you. Nina sneered and scrawled a hefty sum on a napkin pulled from her pocket. This is what you or your assistants get for doing something to bring the desired result. My time isn't elastic either. I need to handle documents, start optimizing my almost deceased husband's business. The doctor swallowed hard several times, staring at the napkin. A greedy glint played in his eyes, but in the end he refused. Sorry, but I can't. He shook his head. My freedom and job are worth more. I wouldn't even get to use that money if it came out. Weakling Nina snorted and looked toward the window of Leonard Paul's private ward. Well, no matter, I'm sure there's someone here more agreeable. At 45, Nina felt she'd been married to Marshall too long to let this opportunity slip. A skilled economist by training, she'd been forced to stay in his shadow for nearly a decade because of his belief that women had no place in business. Nina questioned several orderlies and nurses, but none agreed to hasten her husband's end. She was even surprised. Didn't any of these penniless medics want to make a good buck? It was a trivial matter, really. Just a slight increase in a heart med dose and voila. But finding an accomplice for her dark scheme kept failing. Nina decided not to tempt fate and wait for her husband's natural departure from life. Meanwhile, Zania was seriously set on pulling her father back from the other side. Thoroughly reviewing his medical history, she began seeking alternative treatments that could boost or even replace his medications. After long searches, she learned of a herbalist, Peter, living in a remote village near Olympia. People said nature itself had gifted him with knowledge, and he knew herbs better than any credentialed biologist. As Zania understood, the young man got his power directly from his grandfather, also a famed local healer. If only I could be sure it had helped, Zania said to herself, scrolling through Peter's info posted on a Seattle forum. She knew risking her father's life was highly dangerous. One wrong move and it could all collapse. She'd somehow miraculously wrested extra days for Leonard Paul from death, but clearly it was too soon to relax. Talking with some who'd visited Peter and reading reviews from patients cured of various ailments with his miraculous potions, Zania concluded it was worth a shot. Just, let's make sure your wife doesn't find out, she asked the businessman, laying out her thoughts about the herbalist. A little bird told me Nina's been poking around about why I'm in your ward. Don't pay her any mind, Marshall brushed off. She's got a thing for getting jealous even of a chair, but she won't do anything serious to you. Don't worry, Leonard Paul gave a faint smile. He was feeling worse than usual that day. Zania smiled back, but wasn't so sure about Nina. She'd caught a glimpse of the stately, stunningly beautiful woman recently, and all that emanated from her was danger and fierce malice. Zania would never trust such a person in her life. Zania, I'm not against trying your herbal treatment, Marshall said meanwhile. But are you sure we can keep it from my attending doctor? I don't think Dr. Zachary will be thrilled to know his main patient's taken up non traditional medicine. Marshall tried to laugh at his own quip, but quickly coughed. Zinnia knew she had little time left. Don't worry about that, she said, handing him an oxygen mask. If these brews start helping, I'll bring them to you every day. Going to the herbalist the next day, Zinnia saw a broad-shouldered, medium-height, fair-haired man, whose light brown eyes shone with understanding and kindness. "You're from Marshall, right?" he asked, and added, "Come in. I'm up to speed on your situation, prepared a few brews to test. One's bound to work." "How'd you know?" Zinnia said in genuine awe. "I saw you in a dream." The man replied, simply tapping his forehead lightly. "If a person shows up in my dream, it's a true sign. Expect them with their trouble." Zinnia shyly averted her gaze, eyeing the bundles of dried herbs and roots hung on the log walls. Peter set 3 pots before her, each with its own brew, and offered her to taste each with a big wooden spoon. "Why," the nurse asked. "I'm not the one taking it. Your father's the sick one," Peter said, surprising her even more. "And to know for sure which brew will help him best, you've got to try them yourself. You'll feel which pot's the right one for your dad. Your blood will tell." Zinnia didn't ask how he knew her family secret. Maybe it was in a dream too. But whatever it was, she risked trusting the herbalist. She tried the brews one by one. The one from the second pot tasted the best. Zinnia thought it was just soft enough rich and wouldn't upset the stomach. "All right," the herbalist nodded when she pointed. "Have your father take it 3 times a day, strictly after sunset. When the brew runs out, come back. I'll make a new one." Thanking the young healer, Zinnia rode the train back to Seattle in mixed feelings. She didn't know if this medicine would work, but for some reason she believed her trip would surely do her father good. "Well, then let's take a chance," the businessman said, taking the precious brew from her hands. After trying it, the man remarked how pleasant it tasted. "Just like the herbal tea I had in China," he said, and immediately lay back down. That was the herbalist's instruction: lie down right after taking the medicine. That night, Marshall got very sick. He was nauseous, his temperature spiked almost to 40 degrees. And in the morning, as soon as she heard about it from Hera, Agnes, Zinnia rushed to the ward. But to her surprise, Leonard Paul met her in great spirits. She might have been wrong, but it seemed to her there was even a slight flush on his cheeks, which hadn't been there before. "It's something unbelievable," her father recounted excitedly. "At first, I thought this herbalist was out to poison me. It was so awful last night. But then just before dawn, it eased up. Whew! I can feel my strength starting to come back. It's the right treatment, I'm telling you." Zinnia couldn't hold back joyful tears. She was overjoyed that the brew worked. Relief filled her soul so much that she thought a bit more, and she'd faint from the surge of emotions. "It worked," Zinnia whispered to herself, leaving the ward. From that day, Leonard Paul noticeably perked up, felt that not all was lost, and was ready to fight for his life as long as it took. Zinnia couldn't gather the courage to tell him she was his daughter. The fear of being misunderstood, of being rejected, overwhelmed her every time she pictured that important conversation. In despair, Zinnia turned to her mother for support, begging her to reach out to the businessman herself, to confess everything. But Vera flatly refused to help her with this. "No, sweetie, I won't get into that, and I don't advise you to," her mother said sternly. "How many years have passed? Lenny's probably gotten even tougher, more selfish. And his wife, have you seen that snake? One look from her and it's clear she'd spare no one for money." Zinnia tried to explain that it wasn't like that at all, but her mother wouldn't hear it. "Want my advice? Don't mess with that family. You helped your father get back on his feet. He's feeling better, great. Let it stay that way. He doesn't need to know about you. And what would it even change, Mom? Aren't you tired of living with this lie after so many years? Zinnia asked with tears in her eyes. But Vera stayed unyielding, saying it was better to live like this in peace and safety than to try playing with fire in her right mind. In the end, Zinnia realized she'd have to confess everything to her unusual patient on her own. The girl brought that very photo album to work. Sentry. Hey, where you off to so early, Hera? Agnes folded her powerful arms across her chest, blocking the young nurse's path to the ward. I wanted to check on Leonard Paul, Zinnia said calmly. But in response, she saw the senior nurse shake her head. No, not today. I've got so many chores on the second floor in the general wards. Can't do without you. Put that album aside and let's go. By the way, what's it for? I wanted to share some memories. Zinnia replied vaguely. They say joint talks have a positive effect. Hera Agnes just snorted and told her to leave the album at her post. Meanwhile, sending Zinnia to work, Hera herself started flipping through her album and stumbling on the photo of the young businessman from the private ward. She instantly put two and two together, realizing she had very valuable information that had to be shared with the department head. Well, well, so we've got a millionaire's daughter in our department. Valentine Victor greedily rubbed his hands, thinking how to use the obtained info against the nurse. I'm absolutely sure Nina knows nothing about this. Hera smirked smugly and gave the department head a meaningful look. How about passing this important info to the businessman's wife? Naturally, for a reward, the department head suggested correctly reading Hera's look. Don't worry, I won't shortchange you. We'll split the fee in half. Valentine Victor was the department head for a reason, knowing what was going on and where. So when they reported to him that the businessman's wife was trying to bribe employees in his department in hopes of getting rid of her husband faster, he quickly figured he could use it to his advantage. That same day, the department head called Nina and for a good sum told her about her new rival. That little tramp, she exclaimed. I kept wondering why she's fussing around my husband. So pushy. She's been feeding him some nonsense and he's come back to life. The senior nurse, all this time quietly spying on Zinnia, told Nina that she often brings her husband some odd clay pots. And it looks like, judging by everything, those brews are what's making your husband better. Hera Agnes concluded over the phone, thus spurring the businesswoman to active steps. Nina decided to use cunning as it was important to her that her husband's death looked like an unmistakable crime, which she planned to pin, of course, on Zinnia. This way, she'd hit two birds with one stone, getting rid of both her husband and his illegitimate daughter. The businessman's wife had one old acquaintance, Stan, a former therapist fired in disgrace for selling controlled meds on the side. But the dismissal didn't mean his career was over. On the contrary, Stan went over to the criminal side and started doing so-called gray practice, helping criminals fix their health when needed. It was him Nina asked to get close to the herbalist. The healer had long needed a competent and reliable assistant. Peter asked locals to check with city contacts if there was a trustworthy person in mind. And Nina, learning about this through her channels, decided to exploit the situation. For all his rotten nature, Stan had one undeniable quality. He knew how to charm people and win them over. So when he showed up at the herbalist's doorstep, lying that he was applying to be an assistant per an ad, Peter, not suspecting a trick, took him on. Crappy intuition healer Stan thought to himself, putting on a good-natured smile as he followed the herbalist. All evening, he listened closely, pretending to diligently memorize the herb-gathering instructions. And in the morning, learning that one of the brews needed to be delivered to Leonard Marshall, he eagerly volunteered as courier. "Don't worry, Peter. I know the city like the back of my hand. I'll find that Seattle hospital in a snap." He lied to the herbalist. "Mind you, the brew needs to get there as fast as possible," Peter warned him. "Usually Zinnia comes for it around this time, but for some reason, I can't get through to her today." Peter didn't mention the nurse's kinship with the businessman to a stranger, thinking it unnecessary. Taking the brew, Stan headed to the city, but first stopped by his apartment where he had a small lab. Checking the brew's composition in his notebook, the doctor smirked and boldly splashed in one very potent herb which, in high doses, could easily cause a stroke or heart attack. Job done, the man took the pot to the hospital and, as if nothing was up, passed it to Zinnia through the senior nurse. The girl, who that day was deliberately buried in work to the point she didn't even have time to drink water, was surprised to see someone other than Peter. Only then did she remember she hadn't picked up the brew and listened to another lie from Stan that he was the herbalist's assistant. Less than half an hour later, Marshall fell into a coma. Zinnia, just then preparing to go to him to confess everything, heard the doctor's shouts ringing through the corridor. Rushing into the ward, she saw only an empty bed and a shattered clay pot lying nearby. "Well, Sentry, you're finished," the senior nurse said behind her, smirking smugly. What are you talking about?" Zinnia didn't understand. "Don't play dumb," Hera said slyly, inspecting her nails. "You poisoned the patient. Everyone saw you bring the brew to his ward." Passing by her, the woman suddenly leaned to her ear and whispered quietly, "What wanted to be the sole heiress? His money lured you, didn't it?" Zinnia froze in place, not believing her ears. How did Hera know about her connection to the businessman? And why was she speaking so calmly about poisoning? Didn't she care about a person whose life was hanging by a thread? "Don't stray too far," the senior nurse advised in the same tone. "The police are already on their way." Sitting in a Seattle police station hours later, Zinnia tried to prove she didn't want to kill Leonard Paul, and certainly wasn't after his inheritance. "Please, it's some monstrous mistake," the nurse said, nearly crying. "Leonard Marshall really is my father, and I wanted to help him. That brew was getting him back on his feet. I don't understand how poison could have gotten in it." But the police were more inclined to believe the businessman's legitimate wife, who, putting on a whole performance before them, declared the suddenly appeared daughter the main murderer, trying to take the life of the person dearest to her. Moreover, right after the incident, they arrested Peter too, branding the village herbalist a ruthless quack whose herbs and brews only brought harm to people. The man was interrogated and, just like Zinnia, placed under investigation, both declared accomplices lusting to seize and later split the inheritance. "I warned you." Sweetie Vera sobbed into the phone when Zinnia was finally allowed to call. "I told you don't get mixed up with that family." "Mom, please don't worry," Zinnia tried to calm her. "I'll think of something. I feel like the police will figure it out." From the other end of the line came only a long, sorrowful sigh. Soon Zinnia was informed she'd been fired from work to avoid possible scandals. Yeah, no way this happened without Crane. Zinnia thought to herself, sitting in a cold cell alongside several hardened recidivists who looked at her like she was a juicy piece of steak in the middle of a starving desert. Nina Marshall, aiming to force a confession from the girl, paid off some not-so-clean investigators, to put her in a cell with highly dangerous criminals. They were supposed to beat a confession out of Xenia, per the warden's orders, and now they were slowly closing in on the girl like a pack of ferocious hyenas. "Come on, you scum, spill it all," one of the inmates yelled at her, her knuckles entirely blue from tattoos inked on them. "Thought you'd knock off your old man. Gaping for his dough, you little runt." 5 women surrounded Xenia, who desperately fought back against the group piling on her. The criminals kicked her, yanked her hair, but she never admitted to wanting to kill her father. "I've got nothing to tell you. Get off me," the nurse finally exploded. "If they promised you something for this, don't count on it. Whoever did this won't pay you." I know for sure. The recidivists exchanging glances backed off. They were stunned by the girl's resilience enduring beatings and outright torment, but not confessing to anything. "Oh, gals, I'm feeling bad." Suddenly came a low female voice from the far bunk, where Raven lay, the most influential prisoner in the local jail. "Looks like I need a hospital." "Sound the alarm," she groaned, collapsing onto the mattress. Xenia, reacting faster than anyone, leapt to the woman, and quickly checking her, gave a clear verdict. "Heart attack, probably from the stuffiness." "Call a doctor quick." Xenia, whose nursing skills were honed to perfection, gave first aid, and that, as it turned out later, literally saved Raven's life. "I owe you now," she said slowly a few days later when her condition improved enough to return to the cell. "No need." Xenia shook her head. "Any normal person would have done it, and I'm normal." "Yeah, I see." Raven gave a short chuckle. "That's why I want to help you, silly. Heard about your mess. Don't know, maybe you really ain't guilty. That's rare here." The woman looked up where a tiny barred window sat. "I got a good lawyer out there. Solid guy, won't rip you off. Works his fees, honestly. I'll tip off the right folks to put in a word for you with him." Xenia was surprised at first, but then sincerely thanked her. She hadn't thought she'd meet grateful and decent people in a place like this. Soon, a professional lawyer did show up for the girl, and he pretty quickly and skillfully got her out of jail, tearing apart the hastily cobbled together case against her. At the same time, Xenia herself gave new testimony to a different investigative team, in which she recounted the sudden appearance of Stan, the herbalist's assistant. It was he who brought the poison brew to the hospital on the day of the tragedy. The police tracked the man, and soon they managed to record an interesting video in which the businessman's wife was handing the Gray Doctor a hefty package. As it turned out later, there was money in it, the sum for which Stan agreed to worm his way in and poison Marshall. Now it was clear to the investigation who exactly was the mastermind. Nina and her accomplice were arrested, and after the verdict, both faced a long term. All charges were dropped from Xenia and Peter, and the young people finally found themselves free. What happened brought them closer. So, when the herbalist suggested to the young nurse that they gather plants together, the girl, who really liked the remarkable healer, gladly agreed. Fortunately, Leonard Paul came out of the coma thanks to a healing tincture from Peter, which he asked to be added to the businessman's regular IV at the last moment. The tincture worked a literal miracle, and Marshall came to genuinely surprised that he was able to survive at all. The man finished the course of brews, and to the doctor's amazement, almost completely recovered. True, a long restorative. Therapy lay ahead of him, but that seemed a mere trifle compared to having a whole life ahead. Xenia finally confessed that she was his daughter. Showing the photos in the album, the girl faced first bewilderment, and then the tight paternal embraces of a man who in one day, unexpectedly for himself, gained both a chance at full recovery and a real daughter. And what about your mom, Vera? How's she doing? Leonard Paul showered his daughter with questions. I need to talk to her. God, I'm so guilty before her. Zinnia told him about her mother and reassured her father that he could always come visit them. Something tells me she'll want to talk too. Zinnia winked. She's just nervous and can't shake off her stubbornness. That's what kept her from telling you about me all these years. Seeing genuine tears of joy in the businessman's eyes, Zinnia silently hugged her father. And 6 months later, Zinnia and Peter celebrated a lively village wedding near Olympia, where not only all their friends were invited, but literally anyone who wanted to come. Leonard Paul and Vera sat side by side at the celebration. They managed to make up and found a new meaning in their renewed union. Now they were not just Zinnia's parents, but true soul friends whose feelings were as tender and deep as a river just breaking free from ice in spring. And a few months after the wedding, Zinnia announced she was pregnant. Peter kept working with herbs, and his fame flew far beyond the village near Olympia, where they built a new, much more beautiful and spacious house with Zinnia. Zinnia didn't return to the hospital after her release, instead becoming an assistant to her beloved. As for the department head and the senior nurse, they were soon fired and disgraced themselves. An inspection that arrived from the Washington State Department of Health found a ton of discrepancies in the documentation, and pretty quickly, all of Valentine Victor's sins regarding extra paid tests and supplements were finally exposed. If you liked the story, I ask you to support me with a thumbs up button. For you, it's just one click, but for me, it's very important. All the best.